What you're about to hear is an incredible conversation I had with Greg McKeown. You might know him as the author of Essentialism, also of the incredible book Effortless. He has an amazing British accent. Greg is somebody who has been a, what's the right word? He has been a maverick in the most unexpected way. And he has paved his own path in life, in business, in family. And when I think about the principles, the practices, the systems required to living an incredible life, both in business and life, he is definitely somebody on my vision board who I feel is actively taking action and making decisions in a profoundly different way, in a way that is creating a result and an outcome that is very, what I would call, not normal. And in this conversation, we talk about the painful process of writing a book and kind of personally what he faces in that process and what has worked, what hasn't worked. He walks me through asking some better questions as I asked him about that process of writing a book, as I have attempted to do that myself. And I feel I have failed. And to my surprise, he gave me some direction and solutions that are kind of blowing my mind. And so right now I'm excited to hop in and have an amazing conversation with Greg McKeown.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
How are you, Katie?
I'm doing amazing. How are you?
I am well. I'm happy to be with you.
I'm really happy to be with you. Honestly, like to answer your question in greater in depth, I'm
Mm.
doing amazing because of you and essentialism. Like you
Come
transformed
on,
my life.
Katie. That's
No, I'm
cool.
serious. I'm not blowing smoke. It was
Mm.
about 8 years ago, and I was in a level of constraint that felt inescapable. And it was really terrifying.
Wow.
And essentialism just pulled me out of the noise and the chaos and helped me make some really critical decisions that have led me to this beautiful life that we're living right now. So thank you.
Hmm. I've been learning recently about the very particular phrase. It's not a new idea entirely to me, but the idea is meaning frames and how when we
Mm,
get stuck in life, it's because we've come to a point where the meaning frames we have make something insoluble. They
mhm.
can't fit together now because this thing means X and this thing means Y. And so like these, we can't work with them. And that is when a new meaning frame, a new paradigm can be so life changing because it suddenly offers us a way forward, like a moral way forward, an alternative to the trap we were in before. And so that's what it
Mm.
sounds like you're describing to me a
Oh
little bit,
yeah.
unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying.
No, it's so true. And the irony of it all, we had built a multi-million dollar international business. My husband and I are product designers, created a brand, and it was all about simplifying parenthood. So our products were
Mhm.
beautifully simple and really
Mm,
brilliant in their
mm,
elegance and their design.
mm.
But the business was, like, so complex and very multidimensional, and it was, like, 5 businesses in one, and, we were having more and more kids, so it was, like, this image and brand of simplicity, but this reality of just way too
That
much.
well, that comes at its own cost, doesn't it? I mean, when
Yeah.
we need to appear a certain thing which we are less and less, you know, f embodying, then that
Mhm.
creates its own stress, like, because you're faking something, you're forcing something. I can
Yes.
feel like that with essentialism and effortless. If I don't, which I really try to do, which is to go, "Oh, yeah, I get all of this wrong." Like, all the time, it's a constant search,
Mm.
constant have to keep coming back to these ideas. It's a disciplined pursuit. It's a like, that is its own antidote to the problem. Otherwise, it's like you've already shifted. You're into a new game, which is appear like your ex. And that's a really, I was gonna say intoxicating thing to do, and I think it can be intoxicating, but it's not that really. It it violates something in us. It gets us into a game
Mm-hmm.
we're a long way from ourselves. We're a long way from our integrity,
Mm-hmm.
and then yeah, then we're in a funky game then, man.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
it's about trying to control. It's
Yeah.
about. It's not even trying to control how we. It's not how to control our lives. It is that we try to control people's, how we appear, right? So that means
Mm-hmm.
we are attempting to control utterly uncontrollable, which is other people's perspective of us. And that is a very unhappy way to live.
Oh,
So
it's
anyway, I don't know if
miserable,
if we're
miserable.
on subject or off subject, but that's
No,
what.
we're totally on subject because what essentialism helped me do was tell the truth
Mhm.
and like that this is not working and that we need a radical change. And it was terrifying to me and my husband. Yeah.
Sorry.
But
Sorry about
Greg,
that.
Greg, like listen to the life I'm living. I have my doors open right now, so hopefully we only hear the birds, but
Yeah,
I'm in Puerto Rico,
love it.
like overlooking the ocean. My kids homeschool. They're out there surfing, spearfishing, pickleball, um, doing really exciting, cool, incredible things, developing amazing skills, working for really cool people in my neighborhood and only working 20 hours a week. And like, I coach high performing entrepreneurs. I would have never, ever imagined I would be in this place. But
Mhm,
like you and God pretty much were like, hey,
mhm,
Katie,
mhm.
time for a change.
It's
And it
always
took
it's al
me,
No, go ahead.
well, it took me a bit to get there, but like you helped me create the space to
Mhm.
get quiet and still and honest.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, anytime ideas that I feel like originally come from God, then become like a partnership with Him in somebody else's life where I'm not directly doing something. It's, uh, once described to
Mm,
my wife, Anna, it's like residual goodness or something like that.
mm,
Residual righteousness or residual impact. It's like there's something special about that idea that it isn't limited only to the thing you do with with your body, with yourself right now, that something else goes out there and finds the person. And I mean, it's such a beautiful thing. And your story is a beautiful thing. And yeah, and the story you're describing, um, of the homeschool and where you're living, like I know full well it's like 1,000 decisions that
hmm,
have led to that description that you're giving now, but it all had to be dislodged from the previous strategy for it to even be possible. And so, so once you go, "Oh my goodness, I could homeschool." Oh, okay.
hmm.
Now that you own a lot of problems after that, but you also release yourself from structural constraints that um, that are extremely limiting. And we homeschooled for 8 years, I think, yeah, all in
Wow.
all, and
Hmm.
and and it was a lot of work. I mean, we just
It is.
you just you're living in your lockdown forever at one level. Or I said differently, when they did lockdowns, our life didn't change nearly as much as most people's lives. Um, but um, yeah, how would I express this? It liberated us to be designful, uh, because it released all sorts of other possibilities. When I traveled with our children, when I traveled to do keynotes, 80% of the time, have one of our children come with me, or Anna would come with me,
Yeah.
and I mean that really adds up. The years go by, and that becomes normalized, but you have a system that is working in your favor. And so now, as our
Yeah.
children are like leaving the home and moving on to their adventure beyond that original unit, you have those moments. My number two daughter, Eve, she was very very ill for a few years, but recently. I mean, she recovered fully and recently
Wow.
dropped for a mission. So she's going to Brazil. Well, she's in Brazil now.
Wow.
And she's there for she's there for a year and a half. Like she's like
Mhm.
it's not a weekend or a summer. And when I was dropping her off, she was so excited to go, and we were excited for her. You know, so obvious that this was the next right thing, and so there was no misalignment. But then in the moment of dropping her off, it was suddenly extremely painful. And maybe that's true for everybody. It was true when I dropped on my first daughter for the same type of mission when she went to London, England. You don't get to choose where you go. You just get sent
Mhm.
somewhere in the world, and it was painful then too. So I should have known, but I didn't know. And in that moment, what I think took place, I described it a little bit like an essentialist judgment day, um, or a micro essentialist judgment day, something like that, where you suddenly go like, did I miss it? You
Mm.
see the whole life before you know that my relationship's not over, my role as a parent isn't over, but there is a phase that's done. And you're never getting that back. It is spoken for. And depending, I mean, statistically, it's something like, maybe 94% of the face time that you have with your child is over once they've left home. And so, you know, that's a lot. And so in that moment, what I felt was actually, once I got through the pain of it, was no, I didn't miss it.
Wow.
It's still painful. It was still painful to consider it, to worry about it, and to realize this thing is done. So whatever the answer to the question is, it's done.
Mm.
So, it's a high stakes decision and, or a high stakes question to be wrestling with. And that's what I think was so painful about it. But no, I didn't miss it. We didn't miss it. And so I think that's something like an approximation for the essentialist test of all of life. If we say like if we say that the purpose of life is something like creating ever deepening relationships with the vital few people that matter disproportionately, like the 1,000x people in our lives, um, then we have a test by which we can measure our progress today and all the time, and keep coming back to that. It's obvious that at the end, right? If you talk to anybody at the end of their life, right? I mean, by a country margin, this is what people will think about. The
Oh, yeah.
closest relationships, how close did we get? Did we go deep? Were we truthful? Were we able to connect at those deep levels? Yeah, that's the test.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's so beautiful. I felt my own parental emotions,
Mm,
welling up as you described that.
mm.
And in a way, we've kind of gotten not to the end of the story, but definitely a critical marker. And so obviously, there are experiences that have created this really unique perspective that you have that have had you write Essentialism, have had you write Effortless.
Mm.
So take us back to the beginning and tell us the story of an experience that has radically formed and shaped this very unique perspective that you have.
Well, the origin story that you're asking about was I was working with companies in Silicon Valley and noticed this pattern that I noticed this pattern that companies went through clarity leading to success, leading to an increase of options and opportunities, which could lead, if they weren't careful, to the undisciplined pursuit of more. And if they
Mhm.
fell into the undisciplined pursuit of more, then they could plateau, collapse, or fail altogether. And in the midst of that, then had a personal experience that showed me that the phenomenon that I'd been observing wasn't a business phenomenon, it's just a human phenomenon. And that was when I got an email from my manager at the time, said, look, Friday between 1 and 2 p.m. would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby. Otherwise, I need to be at this client meeting. And I'm sure that they were joking, but even if they were, I still felt pressure to go. And still, when our daughter was born in the early hours of Friday morning, was trying to do it all, laptop open, phone on, how can I do it all? If I can do it all, then I can have it all. And so to my shame, I go to the meeting, and even afterwards, the manager said, "Well, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made." And maybe they did, but the look on their faces did not evince that sort of respect.
Hmm.
And even if that was right, it's obvious that I made a fool's bargain. Everybody understands that. Of course, I understand that. And really, I suppose the key lesson was, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And so, that leads
Take
to a series of questions, right? Like that people can
Yeah.
reflect on as they listen to this. Have they ever found themselves like I was, feeling stretched too thin at work or at home? Have they found themselves busy but not productive? Have they found that their day has been hijacked by other people's agenda for them? If they're finding the answers yes to any of that, they find connection in any of the conversations we've had so far. Well, okay, well, the way out is the way of the essentialist. If the problem is the undisciplined pursuit of more, then the antidote is the disciplined pursuit of less. Or in a 3-word summary of everything I've just shared, less but better. Having that be the
Mm.
mantra and decision lens through which all other decisions are made.
Greg, I love this story, and I think it's an example that a lot of people can relate to. What I want to dig into a little bit more is, I know that timeline in that time period, and there was tremendous hustle culture. And it was like, pay now or pay later. You've got to put in your time. And so, like, I remember those pressures.
Mm.
And hearing this less but better, and a more disciplined pursuit, and being really intentional about where you're spending, that was great in books and philosophy, but nobody was living that at the time. So what was it within you that gave you the courage to start steering your ship in a new direction? Because you were a lone wolf in the beginning. There was like nobody. I even remember when Harrington Huffington, is that her name?
Yeah, yeah,
She,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
came
Ariana
out with
Huffington. Yeah.
this. Yes, Ariana Huffington, she came out with this study and was like, "Guess what? Sleep's really important." And everyone's like, "What?"
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah. Go ahead.
well, my question is, how did you make that decision to kind of separate from the pack and go down your own path? Were there philosophies? Is there a mission? And I assume that a lot of these decisions were made with Anna as well, and like really considering what was happening there. Where were some of the kind of clues that you needed to change the direction that you were headed? And how did you actually start to take action at that critical inflection point?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one answer to that question is that one in an ideal circumstance, you want to have had experiences in your life where you made decisions that were not what other people were doing prior to the pain moments where you really have a lot to lose if you don't get the trade-off right. And what I mean is that so what happened for me was years and years before, um, I just got back from my own equivalent of the mission that my girls have
Mhm.
been on, and I really wanted to have a life that was full of mission. The sense of mission I just had was extraordinary. For 2 years, I had just felt um, so purpose driven, and I had sensed also that I wanted to spend a life teaching, because that's really what I spent, my 2 years doing. But I'd also applied and been accepted into law school in England. So I returned and went to England, and I mean, went to law school, and wasn't enjoying any of it. And simultaneously really wanted to just teach, just write. That's really what you feel born to do, but you've committed to X, and then you've sensed something else is really the thing. And that cognitive dissonance, that sense within us, um, you know, it was really a tough decision, but not exactly the decision. It was to get permission within your own mind and heart. I can choose. I can do something different. I don't have to do what I've been doing. I don't have to finish what I'm doing just because everybody says you can't quit. You have to carry on. And so there was, through that experience, this sense of, well, if you know you're going in the wrong direction and you keep going, then you are just getting lost faster. And that
Mm.
not quitting is not on its own a very satisfactory principle. Like, of course, if you spend your whole life quitting everything you ever do, okay, fine, right. Obviously, there's a place for that. But to discover that there is liberation in uncommitting, that there is power in the real definition of the word decide, right? Comes from the Latin to cut or to kill. Like a decision is cutting or killing something. And so, what I think a lot of people spend their lives doing is not even being aware of the assumptions that and that have been and previous decisions made by somebody else that have defined the frame and structure and size and shape of their lives. So they're just operating within, well, I don't love to use this phrase or something, but like to suddenly discover that they're in the matrix, they're in a matrix that somebody else designed for them, and they're just playing within the rules of that game. And so this was quite, I mean, I was quite young when I quit law school, came to America pursuant of this mission. And so once I felt permission, again, mind and heart, to get out of the life that I had found myself in, it wasn't hard after that. What
Mm.
was hard, and I'm talking about the second time, I'm talking about what led to essentialism and effortless, and this really like a global uh, movement. It's just, in fact, just reached way beyond what I imagined it would at the beginning. And the tough parts in both of those stories, the parallel between them is permission to say no,
Wow.
permission not to do what you've been doing, and to cut or to kill the thing that doesn't feel right, so that you then are free to do the other thing. As soon as I got permission in both situations, psychological permission, you could never have put me back into the original wrapping. I worried that I would go back into it because at the beginning of a new change like that, you're so you're so used to the sensation of being stuck that you're sure you'll get sucked back in, like, I don't know, like just the gravity pull of your past mental, state and meaning frame. But in both cases, in my experience, once you see it, once you have a change of meaning frame for real, it's like you cannot be put back in. You just cannot go back. At least I can't. So I think that's where people have to work on. It's like, get the permission to say no, the permission not to, the permission to do something different than other people are doing. And then just life takes on a completely different feeling, and direction and trajectory after that.
You've been talking previously about the power of choice and agency. And I'm curious more about permission and how because it sounds counter to choice and agency. So tell me a little bit more about getting to this place of, I don't know if it was self permission, permission from God. Where was that permission coming from? And what was the process to
Yeah.
like
Yeah, well, look
discovering
look,
that?
permission is an interesting word to use. So, let's just riff on this for a second.
Go for
So
it.
so there's a quote that is, um, wrongly attributed to Viktor Frankl. Everywhere I go, everyone tells me that he said it. And what he said to have said is, um, there is a there is a space between stimulus and response, and in that space is your freedom, and in that freedom is your ability to grow and to choose and to impact the world. That's my my in my own words, what he's quoted saying. Well, he didn't write that. That appears nowhere in any of Viktor Frankl's writings. That's just wrong. It's used by Stephen Covey in the Be Proactive Chapter 7 Habits. But he told, well, I wrote this to everyone, but he also told me that he found it in a book that he read when he was in Hawaii for a sabbatical. And he just was blown away by the power of it. And he went back later to try and find that book, but he never could find the book. So, so then he just quoted it, but could never give a citation. So that was 25 years ago that I was aware of that. So it's always been this back in my mind to like find out who said it, where did it come from, what's the premise of it. And then I spoke to one of his co-authors of the book he wrote after Seven Habits called First Things First. And so it's A. Roger Merrill who I spoke to. And I asked him that question, among other questions. And he said, "Oh, I do. I know that book. I know what you're talking about. I'll get back to you once I can actually remember the title of it." Okay. So the book, do you know the story? Do you know the answer to this?
I just listened to your
Oh,
podcast,
you
but
listened to the podcast. So
share the story. Yeah.
well, so the quote doesn't exist anywhere. That's the first thing, right? Like that verbatim quote isn't from another book. But the spirit of it, what led him to the insight was when he was reading Gift of the Sea, which of course is by Anne-Marie Lindbergh, excuse me. Uh, and that book is an extraordinarily beautiful book in its own right, especially, here you are, the beach outside, trying to find a new rhythm to your life, trying to find a different way to live and achieving it, and more and more. And so I mean, I think that's just such a beautiful. That was so powerful to me to learn all about this and to make the connections between all of this. That book is such a breath of fresh air, and it's all about space. It's all about creating that space, even though that isn't really the word she uses very often in the book. But the idea of a space between stimulus and response. How do we get it? And even before I'm directly answering your question, still, like, just to say what has happened to that space over the last, like, say 10 years,
Yeah.
and we could go beyond that, of course, but like just in the last 10 years, it's like 2012 when smartphones and social media make this kind of unholy pact. And from that moment on, there is no space. Almost nobody has almost any space anymore. I mean, we've used the language of the matrix already, right? But like, it's time to get back into it. I mean, think of the plugged in matrix that we are in. This is, I say it this way sometimes, that the device in our pockets is not a phone. It's a $3 trillion military grade, addiction creating, and worse than that, connection stealing device. And we are no match for it. And so when I say permission, maybe it's not the right word, but it's something like awareness to how stuck we are in either limited thinking or someone else's thinking or somebody else's system or somebody else's design for us or on us. And so maybe in the law school story, I know I'm doing these two different stories here, but you've got the law school story for me is, my goodness, you don't have to go to this school. This is the same university that my three older brothers had all gone to. It did occur to me to go elsewhere, but it wasn't like it wasn't serious. And it was certainly the path of least resistance. And then like even the thought, oh, you could live in the United States, you could create a whole different kind of life. That wasn't real to me. At first, it's just a thought. It's a glimpse, a tiny thought. And so it's not permission. I wouldn't even say like it's permission from God. I don't think it's permission from somebody else. I don't think it's even permission from myself. It is suddenly just being aware that you have signed up for a set of assumptions and you don't have to live by those anymore. So maybe you do give yourself, I know I'm being contradictory, but maybe you give yourself permission to think newly. Maybe what it really is the courage to think at a new level and to not be stuck by the old thinking that will inherently like basically always feel safer. It might not feel happier or better or more enjoyable, but it will feel safer because it's the thing that you were doing. And so there's an inherent security about that. And there's a known quality about that. So I think it's something to do with that, to release yourself, to create the space, to become aware that you're even in this matrix. And then, my goodness, what if I don't think like that anymore? What if I thought in a new way? What might that look like? What if I designed it in a way that nobody else I know designed it? I mean, the time I quit and when I ended up at BYU, and there wasn't a single person in my whole life that had ever come from England to go there that I knew about. So I knew nothing about that journey. I might as well have been going to the moon. That's how
Hmm.
psychologically it felt. And it's not that dissimilar once I said, okay, I'm going to just move on and create what ultimately became essentialism and this movement. It was not a dissimilar sensation. You're going, I thought I had to do A, B, and C. Well, what if you don't? Who made those rules? Who made the rules that you're living by? It's a very important question, because most of the rules are subconscious and built, and we just think we have to. And then we have, you've mentioned more than once, sort of a faith-based perspective, which I have a faith-driven perspective. And in addition to that, there are times when we have combined limiting rules and we add to it sort of the pressure of salvation upon a rule that is in no way scriptural even. It's just somebody interpreted it that way, or we interpreted that, or our parents did, or our family did, or society did, or a culture at a certain time did, or whatever. And these things can be extremely powerful and unhelpful stumbling blocks on our way to actually live the life we were designed to live. And so it's the permission to break with the old way of thinking. That's what I mean by the word permission.
Okay. That was fantastic.
My TED talk is over.
Live the life that we were designed to live.
Yeah.
Design is a big part of your language. It's a big part of your perspective. Tell me a little bit more about the history of that for you. I don't even know. I attended BYU as well in product design. And so I'm curious kind of what your perspective from design, where it comes from. Quick question for you. What would happen in your business and life if you could show up powerfully? As a coach to high-performing entrepreneurs, I help intelligent people like you do just that. And if you want to be inspired by people who are getting more done in 90 days than most people do all year, I'm going to invite you to go check out my case studies. The website is now.katierichardson.com/case study. And the cool thing is we've got so many case studies there. You can find an entrepreneur who's just like you. I've also got a link for you down in the show notes. Okay, back to the show.
Well, I mean, I'd done work at Stanford, at the D School at Stanford. It's a design school. I was very taken with, Apple's, Apple's obsession over design, even though Steve's like, we don't talk about design a lot. And it's like, well, you do though. But maybe they used a different word, but that spirit of deliberately, intentionally trying to design things. But despite my enjoyment of the idea of design, I actually think a better word is detect.
Hmm.
That design implies, and I think it's helpful, that I need to make this thing happen. And I think that's better than living a life by default. But maybe if I could think of a continuum, it's something like default. Maybe you live by default or by somebody else's rules. You could think about this as like almost a moral maturity continuum, or certainly just a life intentionality maturity continuum. On the one hand, at the very beginning, it's quite egocentric. It's all about us. We're getting our security and safety from the rules we're adhering to. And we didn't make those rules up. Somebody made them for us. They gave them to us. And the degree to which we correctly follow them is how good we feel about ourselves, how safe we feel about ourselves. And we're going to presumably get praised for doing that. And then you sort of move into phase two, which is which is it's a more social. It's like social belonging, uh, fitting in, figuring out what everyone else is doing, and no one's telling us the rules, but we're sensing it and sussing it out and finding our place among the group, and that's a very important natural step as well. And then in this third stage, which I think is maybe what I would say is it's a combination of design and detection. You're detecting it, you're sensing it within yourself. This third level of development is high in integrity, it's high in agency and choice, uh, it, and it is willing because of that integrity, not out of impulsivity, not out of immaturity, but it is willing to move beyond the rules that guided us in the beginning. You are able to, and you need to, in fact, because you're not supposed to be told what to do all the time. That's not the best way to grow or to develop. You got to be told for a little while to get going, but then eventually you have to break through into this other stage. So to me, design and detection seems to me to be a higher level of maturity in the way we
Hmm.
think about the decisions of our lives.
So good. So good. Greg, does God care about your business?
Yeah, I want to give a non I don't want to give a reactive answer to that. Okay, I think I have an answer for this. Um, so from my perspective, a really high value for me is not living a life of consumption, maybe even getting beyond contribution and to the point where you are living a life of consecration, right? So if you grow into the idea of consecration, at level one, even people that are really familiar with that idea of a life of consecration, I think almost everyone that I've talked to in about these ideas will say to me, well, yes, you're giving yourself, you're giving everything, all the good things you're willing to give in service to others. Okay. But that is not the principle as far as I can understand it, because the principle doesn't say all of the things you recognize as good, all the things you recognize that you've been given. It's everything. So, so like, let's say I even have a problem. Let's say I have a problem in my business. This has not been true for me, but I know of two entrepreneurs, husband and wife team, um, started it's a candle-based business. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's been very successful. And he found earlier on in his career, he found that he had this serious problem, $1 million in debt, and it was a really key time in the early stages of the business. And he suddenly one day he wakes up and he's like, "Oh, I need to consecrate this $1 million debt to God." He's like, in the past, I only thought one should consecrate the things you recognize as good. This, he thought, well, I recognize this is bad. Might not actually have been, but that's how he was thinking about it. And so he consecrated that to God. He's like, okay, I'm consecrating everything to him, everything.
Mm.
And I absolutely believe that he cares about anything we consecrate to him. Now, I think he cares about everything anyway, but in my own experience, even things that could be seen by other people as trivial, which anything can be looked at almost like trivial by someone else. But those things that feel important to us. It doesn't really matter what it is, does it? It doesn't matter whether somebody else thinks it's important or challenging. Everything I have ever consecrated to him, he seems to care about, and he seems to have the uncommonest of abilities, like one of the genie in the lamp level skills. or abilities, which is to turn a negative into a positive. And a person who can turn a negative into a positive can never, can never be defeated, right? So that's a great skill to have. It's a great ability to have. And my experience is that anything I've consecrated, whether I thought it was good or I thought it was bad, he can turn it into something amazing. What was there's a scriptural idea here, beauty for ashes. That's a really, really rare and extraordinary ability. You want to be in partnership with somebody who can do that. You want to be in that sense in business. And so I think that's my answer to your question. That's my answer.
That's a beautiful answer. Beautiful answer. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's a really personal question, so I really appreciate you expanding on that, sharing that. You've written 2 incredible books, Essentialism and Effortless. When I first read Effortless, I just was I actually would listen to it as I was walking,
Mm,
and it just always had me I just, kept hitting myself, and I'm like, "This is so good." Like, it's so simple and profound and so true.
mm,
And I'm really curious about your writing process. I've had times where I've tried to write my book,
mhm.
and it is impossible for me, Greg, and I hope you have all of the wisdom and the answers. Like, how do you know when a book needs to be written? And what is your process for
Don't worry about my process.
extracting that?
I wanna ask you about yours. What's your book?
I mean, maybe that's my question. I don't totally know. I think my book is my story. I've heard Jordan Peterson say that if you're going to write a book, you need to start with a question that you're pursuing the answer for as you're writing it. And maybe that's part of it is I have a lot of questions. So I don't know what my one question is.
Mm,
I I definitely think my personal stories are a big part of the book. And maybe that's it. Maybe I don't even know what the question is and I just need to start writing, but I'm quite disciplined and I've tried having specific times set aside for writing. And that's another thing that I've learned about you as I was interacting with your assistant is you have some hard rules around
I do.
writing, which is great and awesome. And I attempted to do something like that and I would sit down for like an hour and a half and I would get 3/4 of a page out. It just was a battle.
Well, I mean, I don't know, were they high quality pages? Were they
I think
rubbish?
so.
Yeah, well, then
I,
okay, look, if you can write 2 rubbish pages every
okay.
day, if you could do that for, like, let's say the rest of your life, you will write bestsellers before you die.
Hmm.
People don't write, and that's why they're not writers, and there isn't another thing. Writing clearly, there it takes a long time.
Hmm.
It No, writing unclearly doesn't take long. Uh, Writing something that isn't new or insightful or true doesn't take a long time. I mean,
Hmm.
people bang out books all the time. I mean, it's not that that isn't your goal. I mean, it could be your goal, so I shouldn't say it that it isn't, but I don't think it
It's
should be.
not.
You're
Hmm.
trying to write something that really takes your business, your impact, your contribution to a completely new level. Okay, so that's one level of, but even that really probably shouldn't be the goal or intent because it won't, it won't work. That's why that isn't the thing to do. It's not enough to want to tell your story, in my opinion. And that doesn't mean that those stories won't be necessary in the book, that they will be. But it's it's what is the pain in the world that could be addressed? And could I find a way to unlock that for people so that they live in less pain? What's the pain, that the felt pain? And then you're getting up every day and you're working on it and it's messy. I mean, even though my assistant does protect my time, I don't keep to that perfectly every day. it's messy. It's messy.
Okay.
It takes me a while to get into the mode of it sometimes. There's so many other things to do. And even though I'm like, I need to do this, and even though I really genuinely do want to do it, I think about today and I think, like, I've worked on it. I worked on my book twice today, very early in the morning once, and then second in the afternoon, and the afternoon, not afternoon, early morning. And it was really irritating to me because I finally get into the muse, and then I had another meeting, and I'm like, I just got a couple of paragraphs in by the time it's time to go. But if you can write,
Mhm.
you write a high quality page in a day, oh yeah, that's a great day of writing.
Okay, I need to lower my bar. It's very helpful to hear that your process is even messy. My creative process when it comes to product design, I'm jumping around, Greg. I'm all over the place.
All
And
creativity is like that.
and so I try and sit down and very methodically, strategically, chapter by chapter, and then it's just not how I work.
That's not how
And so
thinking. It's not just how
yeah.
you, not just that. That's not how you work. That's not how thinking works. That
Mm,
really matters. Our minds are a mess. They're full of 1,000 contradictions. This conversation we've just had will have contradictions in it. We are so fluid and allow so much back and forth and well, what did he really mean? And what did she really mean? And what did that question mean? And we just let it go because it's a conversation. Nothing wrong with any of that. But writing is merciless in comparison because in writing, that second paragraph needs to make sense with the first paragraph and so on and so on. Like the logic must flow. And eventually one must discover a thesis point, the very heart of the matter of the issue that you didn't even know what the issue was at the beginning when you started the process. And you couldn't, I was just saying to Anna today, I think I have the thesis statement. I've been working on this for years. It's like, it's like it's not that one can't come up with a thesis statement on day one. Of course you could. And if you didn't care about it being great, then just write that book. But over time, you're learning and growing and going, well, is it this thing that I mean? Or is it that thing that I mean? And you don't know because you haven't ever even asked that question before you're sitting there writing. Writing forces thinking at a higher level. And that is messy. And that's why it takes a long time. Not the words on a page, it's clarity on a page. That is not for the faint-hearted.
yeah. Thank you. I needed to hear that. And it sounds like you're currently writing a book, and it sounds like you've been writing and only just now are starting to discover the thesis, even though you've been writing. Did I
That's
understand that
right.
correctly? Okay,
Yes.
good. I'm in good company. Okay.
Yes. Yes,
Um,
I would take this process that you follow on product creation. You know all about product creation. Well, your own expression has been that. A book
sure.
is a product. Do it
Sure.
exactly the way you would do a product. Whatever your process for that was, do it exactly that way for a book. Stop thinking about a book as a book. This book is a product. Who's it for? What do they need? Why do they need it? How does it different than all the other products out there? Maybe it's not differentiation strategy. Maybe it's what are the best things in this whole category? Let's take the 5 to 10 to 20 products in this book product category and let's work out all the things they do have. Make sure that my book also has them, plus the things that those books don't have. Let me go get to that point where a publisher goes, yes, I actually want it. That's a great book. And we still don't do it because we want the product to be something special and to have a life of its own. And we keep going until the book I'm working on now, the sensation I have with it, and this isn't a confidence. Actually, I don't feel confident, but the sensation I have is I will simply not publish it till I know it is special.
Mhm.
And that's it. So it's not about getting another book done. It's not about getting another New York Times bestseller out the door. That is not the goal. I want to write something that unlocks people, that is a serious blessing to them. That's a serious blessing to me. I'm living this book. I am trying to apply it every day. So that's why the thesis can't be just given at the beginning. I have to become something I wasn't before I even understand the thesis. I have to learn things about the world, people's pain, what's actually going on to cause that pain, what the possible solutions are. There's loads of learning, and eventually you can capture the essence of that into a thesis. And I do just sense I'm close. I hope it's true. I really hope that's true. And then that's a gift after that. You can print that up, and every day you just come back to it and back to it, and you don't get bored of it. Everyone else, you just out bore other people. They get bored of the goal and you're not bored of it still. And you go on and on. You
Mm,
have to get to the point where you really have something you feel that about, and you're confident that that's going to meet that felt pain in the world. Because you're not going, if the book is successful, you will have to speak about it, teach about it 1,000 times. And it's be new to the people you're speaking to, but to you, you've heard it so many times. So you have to get to something that is is real and special to you and special to others, and it lights people up. And you know, you don't have to write, you don't have to create the product that way, but presumably that's the kind that you want, and it can be done. You just, yeah,
right. In
slow.
a way in a way, we just came full circle because what you just illustrated to me is you showed me I was stuck in this paradigm
Mhm.
of what I believed a writer looks like and what it
That's right.
means to be an author and how that needs to play out, and you just said, "Hey, Katie, how about you just get rid of that and you follow your own process, permission to follow my own process, break all of those rules," which, by the way, like, the most beautiful things in my life have come from having the courage to step away from those rules
Yeah.
step into the unknown while maintaining truth and true principles. That's the
Right.
key, right?
Right.
And that's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it is a beautiful moment. And what I think is interesting in what you said, the thing that stands out for me actually is the idea you said, yeah, I have to break away from my idea of what an author is. And that's why I think permission is such a good word for it, because nobody has probably nobody has actually said to you, well, an author is A, B, and C.
Right.
So so somehow it's been picked up, like it's been absorbed through the skin. Maybe it's your own perception of it, or maybe it's just in movie descriptions, or maybe it's just, or maybe it's something you've read by people like me in books where I describe the writing process, and you can't give all the color to it. So you go, oh well, he just wrote from 5 till 9 every. That was it. That's how he did it every day. There's never any change, and so you create a story, yeah, isn't even true. And
Right.
that's a good word to kind of crescendo towards, as we end this, is truth. That's the permission. And that's why it's not permission to be impulsive exactly. And that lower maturity approach to decision making. It's not saying, hey, I don't want the rules, I want to go backwards in my immaturity. It's it's the courage to really pursue what you really believe is true from your own experience, from what you actually have learned, and to not be litigious about, well, I guess those were what other people thought were the rules, and that's what I've been told are the rules. It's like, yeah, that gets you to a certain place, so you can maybe avoid some of the traps that they went through. But man, it's a liberating, powerful journey once you really start to speak the truth, listen truthfully in a spirit of truth, when you are trying to look within yourself and go, does this feel true? Is this what I actually believe myself? That's, I think that approach to life is the way to achieve the absolute best possible future for yourself. And even though it doesn't feel like it in the moment, because quitting law school, maybe in the moment you're like, I don't know, uh, you know, quitting a job and starting, oh, I'm going to write what eventually became Essential. You don't know. It doesn't look pretty, Although actually in both of those cases, now that I was about to say that, like, it doesn't always look pretty, both cases inside, it was so clear, felt so good. It really didn't feel very risky in either case, because once you have that internal sense of truth, you know, you're not dependent on anybody else after that. You're free to keep pursuing that, more truth, more truth, more truth. That's what we're going for. And then I think that's a completely different way of living. Yeah.
100%. It's a beautiful way of living. It's not clear and obvious. To your point, there is so much noise and distraction in our life. And so I know we need to wrap up here. Can I ask you one last question?
Uh,
You seem to have found this magic sweet spot where you're just famous enough, but like life is not, you're not,
uh,
I'm assuming you're not attacked as you walk through the airport or, right? And
okay.
that's that's kind of where I'm aiming at. It's like just
Yeah.
famous enough. Um, what does it look
What's the
like? Like,
question?
well, I'm curious kind of like what's even the size of your team and how do you operate so that you get enough awareness and enough attention, but it doesn't consume your life?
Yeah. So sometimes my children will, in an effort to, like, because I don't announce to anyone that I'm meeting in normal life anything I do professionally, right? Like, I'm not
Mm,
Kenobi for quite a long time in some other role or capacity, and not anything I've done, right? And so
that's cool.
occasionally one of my children will say, "Yeah, well, my dad's actually kind of famous." And I'm always have the same thought, and I say it out loud, which is, "Look, if you have to say that you are, then you aren't." And that's exactly how I feel, right? Like, I don't feel famous, but I know what you're saying, and I think it's a nice description of it, because it's enough that you what it is, this is the description, is it's enough that it opens something like any door you want open,
Yeah.
but without the downsides of doors being closed because it's not possible now, right? You
Mm,
watch The Crown and the depiction of Princess Diana's life and how utterly chained in she is. The doors are
yeah.
closed. The fame is closing her life into a tiny little box, not opening doors for her. Uh, Obviously, they opened a lot, but it closed a lot, and so that's, I think,
Mhm.
where it reached diminishing returns or even negative returns. Yeah, I mean, the life for me is a deliberately simple life. I mean, I have my assistant. I have a small team. I have my technology person. I have writers that help with various things in research. I have, people that are helping to build the Essentialism Academy, which has been a very low key thing. But over the next, I mean, there's whole classes and courses that people can take, but it's been a sort of a long term, slow burn love, like slow productivity, right? Like, just we're gonna just keep doing it and keep making it masterclass level content, and that's going to grow. I think conservatively, it will grow significantly over the next couple of years, and that's kind of it. That's the group. I have people that handle keynotes for me, but I've said no to so much,
Mm,
so much. I say no to probably, I don't know, let's say 9 out of 10 keynote requests. I say no to 9 out of 10 media requests, probably more than that, 20 maybe. Um, and it's really necessary, because the more because the once you create the product of a book that works, meaning it's more than a business card, right? Like, so there's books that you do, people just, and it's a business card, and there's nothing wrong with that.
yeah.
That's a success in itself and can open doors. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The, but if you get a book that has a life of its own, it's doing a lot of the work for you after that. That's why it's worth paying the price to create a distinctive product in the first place, something special, is because is because it means that what 10 times the number of people I've just described could not achieve, cannot make up for the product not being right. I mean, you've seen it sometimes, and I'm
Mm.
not really trying to make a political point, but like I think about Mayor Bloomberg. I mean, I'm politically independent. You think about him running and spending $1 billion of his own money to try and get, well, to try and get the nomination, first of all. And he just couldn't get any traction. And I don't really know why. I'm just saying an example of what I'm saying. Like if the product isn't connecting with people, you can't solve it in post-production. You can't go, "Hey, we'll market our way to a tremendous success." I just don't believe that that's even possible. You have to create something that connects with people from the beginning. And so then you can keep your team small, but the risk of having a big success in a book for you is that the moment it happens, every single request you get will feel relevant to you, highly relevant to you, because
Mm.
it's exactly what you care about. They are coming to you going, "Will you come and do this thing for us on the subject you wrote about carefully and thoughtfully for all those years?" So you want to say yes to everything. Will you create an app about that thing? Will you create a workshop version? Will you do a train the trainer model? Will you do a TV show? I mean, there are so many versions, and every version feels like it's just one edition, but actually every version and every edition is a new business. That's what I've learned. And so you have to go, how many businesses do I want? And you're like, well, not many. So then you have to be very careful about which versions you want to hold on to, because otherwise they will own you. You think you're building a machine to bless your own life and to bless others, but actually you built a prison that controls you. And that is full circle back to what you said at the very
That
beginning.
is full circle. That is full circle, which brings me to my last question, which
Uh,
is wh why did you say yes to being on What's Working Now? Because like, when I got the response and maybe you didn't say yes, maybe it was your assistant, but I was, of
right.
course, elated, but surprised because I know how disciplined you are with your time.
Well, I'm just trying to honestly remember what
Yeah.
was with it. But I think you wrote about how effortless it impacted you. I think that's what you wrote about. And I think it was that particular connection that got my attention, because I feel quietly confident that Effortless has a long, long journey ahead of it. Like
Mm.
every so when you create something with care, it I've already mentioned the phrase, it like has a life of its own. And
Mhm.
and one metaphor that I think is reasonably good is it's like water running down a mountain. And you can pour the water, but you don't know where it goes. And that's true with books, as true with books as anything. And my sense is, what is curious to me about Effortless is that momentum has grown over time. It's like been slowly growing, but it just has grown. And I think it's fascinating to me that that's true. And I really believe it can be as great a blessing to an individual as essentialism is. It's not as hard hitting as essentialism. Essentialism is just so like, you're way too busy. You got to be way less busy. There's an essentialist, and it's a very clear black and white type framing of an issue that everybody feels acutely. Effortless is a gentler message, but man, I think that it's like a gentle revolution. Once somebody starts to think about it, they're like, my goodness, I have lived my life in a much, much harder, harsher way than I realized. I've been harsher and harder on myself than I needed to be. I've been harder and harsher on my spouse and my children and in my business and the ways I've lived my life, the way I've breathed. I've chosen the hard and harsh way. And I thought that was because it was the better way, the righteous way, the moral way, the way to success. That I was willing to do the hard, harsh thing because I want the benefits down the road, but to suddenly discover, well, you don't need that. that isn't the only path. Actually, it's not even the optimal path. Actually, it's not the path that most of the people that have been tremendously successful over time followed. It's just that the media is sure that they did. So they tell a certain story. So I think that's probably why. And it's just out of a sort of quiet, soulful, but very deliberate, like a determination in me that says, yeah, this water needs to find its way down the mountain to the right people.
Greg, this has been an incredible conversation. I feel like I'm very inspired, uplifted. You helped me connect some dots. You pulled me out of my blinders, believing that being an author, being a writer needs to look X, Y, and Z, and
Mm.
pulled me into this beautiful place of permission.
Mm.
And, really, the other thing that was a huge revelation, realization for me is a book is a product. Hello.
Right,
Like immediately I can see
right,
it differently. And it's exciting to think about sitting down and writing versus intimidating and has me
right,
retreating, right?
right, right. And it's such an advertisement, an unintentional advertisement for either of us for effortless thinking and
Yeah.
action results,
Yeah.
because because there it is.
There
You
it is.
I have to do it the this w- the- like you thought the only way to do it is to do it in this very hard way, unnatural hard way. And then suddenly you go, "Oh my goodness, I don't even have to develop that many new skills. I already have them all. And I just have to do it the way that feels really natural to me and instinctive to me. And I don't have to live by all those made up rules that made it so hard." And I just think like that's effortless. That's why I bothered to write it. There's 1,000 examples of that in our lives. It's like everything we're doing, like we're straining, forcing it. Yeah, that's almost certainly we're doing it the wrong way. We're going against something that's how we were designed and built. And I mean, it takes us to a whole different subject matter that isn't can't be for today's, you know, deep reflection. But think of what. Let me give you this thought experiment because I was just thinking
Let's
about
hear
this.
it.
So from a religious point of view, imagine if you believed you had to repent of breathing,
Mm,
right? Like, imagine how toxic that would be. I mean, obviously, that would be. I mean, it's either kills you because you will force yourself. I will no longer breathe, but of course, you can't really stop yourself breathing. So that's like so. So you could. So that's terrible. But but so then you keep breathing and you feel terrible every time you breathe. You go, my goodness, look at me. I'm breathing again. I'm breathing again. I'm breathing again. And that to me seems like a pretty poignant but true thing that people feel about all sorts of rules that God did not write. He didn't make them. He didn't give them. In fact, it's the other way around. He designed us to be the way we are. And that doesn't mean we can just be immature and impulsive about everything the way that we arrive. Of course, we have to mature, but so many of the things I think we fight against and create meaning frames around that lead us into a position that's something akin to, I got to repent of breathing. I repent of breathing.
mm.
Breathing. And then one day you go, well, you don't. You were actually designed to breathe. And you go, what? What? Well, that's a load easier. That's a lot. That's great. I don't have to be like somebody else, and I don't have to live by rules that were made for someone else that worked for them. Or it's like a completely different. I feel like I'm in this phase right now in my life on a whole variety of things, and it's like reinforcing these ideas of effortless to me in very profound ways. It's like, well, I mean, Jesus wrote it. I mean, he said, "My way, my yoke is easy, my burden is light." Well, I mean, he said it. I didn't say it. You didn't say it. He said it. Is it? Is that how people would describe their lives? Would they describe the yoke of my life is easy and light? But the yoke of my life, of my Christian life, is easy and light. Going to church is easy and light. Living the gospel in my family is easy and light. Living the gospel in my own life design and structure is easy and light. That there's hardly a person I've met in my life. There's hardly a practicing Christian I've met in my life that would use those words. So that suggests to me that we may be trying to be Christian without Christ, which seems to me to be
Mm.
a megalomaniac level missing of the mark. It is an egotistical, un, unintended egotistical way of trying to force our way through life, akin to trying to repent for breathing. It's like we're not supposed to do it that way. It's non-scriptural. It's wrong. And the good news about me saying it in that bold, bombastic way is, what if there's an effortless way of doing it? Yeah, what if there's a completely different way to get the work done that we uniquely are born and built to do? But what if there's a way to do it that is so much better, joyful, and so much less limited by other people's dogma? There we go. That's all he wrote.
Greg, I started this podcast. It's called What's Working Now because I really want to know true principles and the application of those true principles right now, today.
Right.
And you just brought it home. Like, how do you say it? Trying to be Christian without Christ. I mean, that that hit me. That hit me. So thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me, answering these questions, getting down into the details. I I think there's tremendous value in details. Details matter in my life. And so I appreciate you kind of pulling it apart and helping me better understand these principles on a more profound level. So thank you. This has just been absolutely personally amazing.
And my real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And for everybody who's listening, this is What's Working Now. Thanks for listening to the What's Working Now podcast. If you found today's episode to be interesting, be sure to share this with a friend. And if you are looking to level up your organization as a CEO, I'm going to invite you to join the Now newsletter. This is a weekly newsletter. I send it out on Fridays. I tell personal stories, talk about what it's like to build a significant business while raising a family, homeschooling kids. And I even share case studies, very timely, relevant situations where I go into detail how I am helping entrepreneurs navigate, lead, and build incredible organizations. You can get all of that behind the scenes information and more inside the Now newsletter. I've got a link to it right now in the show notes, and I will see you in the next episode.